Well, I mentioned earlier that we're kind of moving into our Christmas season, and I guess it's sort of like officially Christmas season now that we're past Thanksgiving and moving on to December and stuff. Just at the end of next week, and with all of that, there's a couple things that I want to bring your attention to before we really dive into the message this morning. First of all, not in your bulletin, but on our back table on the way out, where they were in your bulletins a couple weeks ago, is our Christmas calendar. Things are going on in there. There are also some of the things are in your bulletin, so make sure you pay attention to them. One of them, I want to remind you, is our Thompson Family Open House. It's going to be this Saturday at our house. The information is in your bulletin. Please come on by 1 to 3 o'clock. Come anytime. Stay as little or as long as you'd like. Come and eat some goodies and just hang out and have some good Christmas fellowship time with us over there. We'd love to see you. We'd love to just get to spend some time with you. And then there's some other things happening within there. But then in your bulletin too, there are some invite cards. These are Christmas invite cards. And like I always like to tell you, this is not for you, right? This is for you to give to someone else. In fact, the information that's on there, if you don't have this information, you're worried you might forget about it. All this information is on our website, and you can even go a quick way to it. You can just go to Christmas at, spelled out, not the little symbol, but Christmas at SCC.com, and that'll bump you over to our Christmas page, things that'll be happening this coming month, all kinds of great stuff. But again, I want to encourage you to use this in the coming weeks to invite somebody to the Christmas season here at Smithfield Christian Church. You know, it has been said many times, and this is nothing that is just someone's idea, but it has been researched and surveyed and found that people are even more open to an invitation to church than we might expect. Sometimes we're worried, like, oh, well, maybe they don't want me to invite them to church, or maybe they'll like, think less of me, or they'll think badly of me or poorly or whatever if I invite them. And so many times people find that when they work up the courage and find the right time, and they do invite a family friend or a coworker or a classmate or a neighbor to church, that so often people say, okay, yeah, I'll give it a try. I'll try it out. And these invite cards are a great way to be able to hand it to them and say, here's the information, here's all the details, the things that are happening in there. So I want to encourage you, check it out. Grab some of these. There's even some more out in the foyer if you want to take some more and share them around and share some love and some invitations with people to our Christmas season. With that, though, one last thing, and then we'll move on. I want to kind of give you a preview of what's coming ahead to Christmas Eve. This year, Christmas Eve is on Sunday, and we are going to have 2 services like we normally do, but one will be in the morning, our normal Sunday morning service at 11 o'clock, and then one will be in the evening at 5 o'clock. Now, both of those services will be different. It's not like, oh, well, it's just going to be the same thing, one in the morning, one in the evening. They're going to be different. We'll do things that we typically do during our 11 o'clock service in the morning, and then that evening we'll do things that we typically do during our Christmas Eve service, like our candlelight and things like that. So I'd encourage you to come to both if you'd like, but sometimes I know that family plans and travels and things like that don't allow that, and so we'd love for you to come and be a part of as many of them as possible. We wanted you to know and be clear, Christmas Eve, 2 services, they are different. Come and be a part of it. All right. Today we are wrapping up this Living Church. I hope that in some ways that this title hasn't been misleading, and I hope that you didn't hear this title and think, oh, we're going to be talking about what it means for like Smithfield Christian Church as a whole to be a giving church, as a body, as an entity. But the truth is, and I'm proud to say, and I got to brag on you guys, the truth is, this is a giving church, and I'm so grateful of what God has been doing in and through all of you over this past year. We shared several of these things I want to share with you in just a couple minutes. We shared many of these things back on our Vision Sunday on the first Sunday of November. But every month, some of the things that you do to help be generous through this church, every month, 15% of the morning offering that is taken up each week, 15% of that is sent to our 7 different ministries and missions around the world. That so far this year, that's been almost $27,000 that have been divided up. Locally, every single week, around 230 kids have food sent home with them after school on a Friday so that they can have meals on the weekends. And a lot of kids are on the free or reduced lunch program, but then when they're home on the weekends, they don't have access to that. And so we send food home with around 230 of them every week. Not only that, almost $1,500 in hygiene products and cleaning and other supplies have been given out this past year through the Smithfield pantry that our Sunday Night Life group supports and manages. Also, in addition to those things, we've been helping out with Thanksgiving baskets for a few families at Hardy. And as we mentioned earlier, we're collecting coats right now for kids in our community. And so, yes, we as a church, we as a group, as a body, we want to, we need to, and we are doing our best to be generous. But this idea of being a giving church, I really wanted us to kind of step beyond just the group as a whole and think more as individuals of God's church. Because ultimately, generosity shouldn't be something that we wait on the church to kind of schedule out for us, right? It shouldn't be like a program that, well, I'm waiting for that to come around and then I'll be generous. Then I'll do something generously, like almost like it's an event. But giving and generosity should be something that who we are, each of us as a Christian. In week one of this series, we looked at God's generosity. We looked at how the Bible teaches us just how generous our Father is to each one of us. And we even started that message by looking at this passage in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26. It says, "Then God said, kind in our..." Now, we don't have the physical features of God, but in his likeness, in his image, in his characteristics, we are image bearers. We're supposed to be reflecting the image in its ways is through us. And we looked at that day, we talked about how God has been generous to us, and we recognize that we need to be generous as well as we bear his image, as we carry his image. The second week in this, that name is Joseph, great name, but his nickname was Barnabas, and that actually meant the son of encouragement. I mean, that's just who the guy was known as, son of encouragement. This was someone who reflected God's generosity in his words and how he spoke to people and how he encouraged people. And friends, we need to be the same way with our words and the things that we say. We should be generous with it. Last week, we looked at the parable of the talents, and we saw how Jesus used this story of a master giving things, entrusting, investing in his servants with the expectation of them to do something. And how my challenge to you was that we would do what we can with what God has given us. Well, today, we're going to look one more time at this idea of being a generous people, a generous church, a giving church. And we're going to look at one more person amongst many in the Bible, one more person who was a generous person, a person who was only mentioned briefly in the Bible, but a person that in those days, in her lifetime, she was known for her generosity. And again, this was more than just kind of like a once-a-year thing that she did in her life. No, this was who she was and how. The next thing I want to encourage you about a generous lifestyle is that a generous lifestyle serves those outside of our circles. A generous lifestyle serves those outside of our circles. What this means is that being generous doesn't stay in the safe and comfortable places of life. I mean, that's not really generosity. Generosity is like an overflow. And when I think of an overflow, I think of things kind of moving into places that you don't want it to be. It's kind of like you pour the soda into the glass and it goes everywhere. It's kind of like something spills out of a container you didn't mean for it. It just goes where it's going to go. And that's how the overflow of our life should be. And I love to look at Tabitha's life, because she wasn't just serving those that it was convenient or socially acceptable for her to serve, whether it was culturally acceptable or religiously acceptable. No, she was serving whoever she could. It talked about how she served both the Jews and the Greeks in her culture. I don't know if you remember a couple weeks ago when we looked at the life of Barnabas, this son of encouragement, that the church in Jerusalem, where the spreading of the gospel started, that when they heard in Antioch that non-Jews were hearing the good news of Jesus and they were accepting the gospel message and coming to faith, they sent Barnabas to that church to check on things, because they didn't like that idea that these non-Jewish people were hearing the gospel. And when he gets there, I love it, because he just gets there and he sees the good things that God is doing and he blesses them and he encourages them. Well, Tabitha, she's also serving these non-Jews. She's serving these Greeks. In fact, it seemed like it was the Greek widows that when Peter got there, it seems like they were the ones that were showing him around in that room and showing him all the different clothing and robes that were being produced by her. Because in those verses where it mentions Peter there, she's referred to as Dorcas. And you can almost imagine and see the love that they're showing to him as they go piece by piece. Maybe they come to these pile of robes and they say to Peter, look at these things that she made for us. Look at these robes that she crafted together with her hands. Look at the love as they move through, and maybe even told stories of how she was blessing them, those who were kind of the outcasts, those who were forgotten about by so many within their culture. But how about us? How about you? How about your generosity? Is your generosity more of a convenient and easy generosity? Do you love and serve those that are easy to serve and love? Do you give to those and take care of those that are like you, or do you kind of move outside of your own circles? Jesus gives us a great example of the way that he loved people that in situations and in society that really it was not the places that he was supposed to be. We see in Matthew 9:10, it says, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked the disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this, Jesus said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Look, I don't know what the equivalent of sinners and tax collectors might be in our day. We still hate taxes, right? We still aren't that big on that. But I think that there are people within our culture today that we would look at and we would say, that's, I guess, probably who we would consider to be those same people. But the same people that Jesus loved and Jesus went to and was generous with his time, was generous with his love. And we need to do the same thing. To be willing to go to the people that don't look the same as us. To be willing to go to the people that don't have the same type of jobs or income that maybe we have. To maybe to go to people that don't even believe the same way that we do and to still show love to them. That means your liberal neighbor, to show them love the same way you were shown love. That means your gay family member that you show them love the same way you were shown love. That means your addicted friend that is struggling, you show them love the same way that people show you love. Friends, a generous lifestyle like we see in Tabitha and the kind that was displayed by Jesus Christ on the cross, it doesn't end where we begin to get uncomfortable. In fact, I think in many ways, that's where it starts for us. Well, another thing about a generous lifestyle is that it leaves a legacy. It leaves a legacy, or sometimes we refer to this or as a testimony. It leaves a testimony even. I love what Paul says, his encouragement to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians 11. He says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. And I think kind of embedded in that sentiment is recognizing that, look, I don't have it all figured out. I don't have it all worked out. I don't know everything, but I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to try my best so that you can then follow me as I follow Christ. And friends, when we look at Tabitha's life and we see how people grieved her loss when she was gone, I mean, they grieved hard. In fact, they were hurting so badly when she was gone that when they heard that Peter was in Lydda, it wasn't like, oh, Peter's next door, or Peter's down the road, or Peter's in Joppa here in this city. No, it said that when he was in Lydda, they sent people to go and get him. You see, Lydda was actually about 10 to 12 miles away from Joppa. Do we have the picture of the image there? Yeah, there we go. So you can see Lydda right where that red kind of arrow is, and Joppa is way out by the coast there. It's about 10 to 12 miles away. And so I Googled, because that's what you do, I Googled how long does it take to walk 10 to 12 miles. And it said roughly 4 hours of consistent, nonstop walking is how long it would take a person to walk that far. And so if we're realistic then, I mean, no one's going to be constantly walking like that. Let's just say 5 to 6 hours of walking. But not only do you have to walk to there, you got to get Peter, and then you got to walk back to where you were. And so essentially a day's travel, they go and get this guy because they are so heartbroken and so devastated that this woman, this generous, lovely woman, has died, and they were serious about finding a way to get her back. And so Peter comes back with them, and he raises her from the dead. And the thing is, I mean, we know that eventually Tabitha did die again, and this time it was something that she was not brought back for. But in the midst of this temporary death, I guess you could say, for her, man, a powerful testimony was left behind. A powerful story, so powerful that people wanted to go to great lengths to get her back. And so it begs the question for us, what kind of testimony are we leaving behind? What kind of ways are we going to be remembered when we're gone? I once heard a preacher talking about the fact, the real truth, the honest truth, that one day we're all going to die. And he said, one day they're going to put you in a box and bury you and go back to the church and eat potato salad. And that's the truth, right? That's just how it's going to be. And they're going to sit around those tables after eating their potato salad, and they're going to tell stories about you. But man, what kind of stories are they going to tell about you? What kind of stories are they going to share? What kind of memories are people going to share? Now, look, I get the point is not for us to be famous. The point is not for our memories to live on. But I hope our generosity, I hope our testimony can be one like Tabitha's that points people back to the generosity of Jesus Christ. Well, one last lesson I want us to grab about a generous lifestyle, and that is that a generous lifestyle can't avoid tragedy. It just doesn't avoid tragedy. You know, this isn't the situation where, like, if you do enough good things, or you give enough good things away, or you spend enough time serving people, that God's just going to stop everything bad happening from your life, right? God's going to be like, oh, this is a good person. We're going to put up a shield, and nothing bad's going to happen. And also the opposite is not true too. It's not a thing that if you don't do enough good things, or if you don't give away enough, that somehow God's going to like send bad things your way and punish you. This is such an archaic idea that really is not supported by Scripture. In fact, we see in Matthew 5, Jesus talking about different people and different relationships that people have with God. And he says this, Matthew 5:45, he says, he causes, meaning God causes his son to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. You see, friends, good things and tragedy are going to come on people who live good lives and people who live bad lives. We can't avoid tragedy just because of our generosity. I mean, you look at Tabitha. Who knows the kind of riches that she probably could have earned with these clothes that she was just giving away. I mean, I don't know what a handmade outfit would have cost in those days, but I know what a handmade outfit costs today, and they didn't have factories and machines to crank these things out, so I'm sure it was not cheap for them to have these things, and she was just giving them away. But even in the midst of that generosity, even being such a blessing, it doesn't keep her from getting sick one day and dying. And friends, when we live a generous life, it's no guarantee that life is going to be simple, that life is going to be pain-free. In fact, sometimes being generous and sometimes being willing to give up things, to give away things, sometimes that even means we miss out on certain things within our own lives. And I'm not saying then that being generous equals hardships, but we don't give and we're not generous with the expectation of some type of special blessing from God. Generosity doesn't save us from tragedy. A generous lifestyle, it goes beyond just this time of year. And this is typically when we talk about generosity, especially within our church family here. Typically in the month of November, I'll take some time for us to really focus in on giving and generosity and for us to think about how we can give back. But it's more than just a Thanksgiving thing. It's more than just a Christmas kind of thing. A generous lifestyle, it uses what God has given us. It blesses and serves others outside of our circles. It leaves a testimony, a legacy, and it doesn't avoid tragedy. But most importantly, and this is the reason that we are to be a generous people, it reflects the true image of God. And so as we kind of bring this series to an end, and as I bring this message to an end of what it means to be a generous person and live a generous lifestyle, I want to kind of finish out by giving you a few suggestions. In your bulletin, if you're a note taker like I am, there's some space where you could write some things down. These suggestions aren't going to be on screen. I just want to throw out some different suggestions for you to consider of how you can begin to make your life more of a generous lifestyle, of how you can make it just a normal part of your life. And this is what I want to ask that you do. I want to ask that you find at least one of these things. If you want to be diligent and write them all down, you go for it. But if you want to just kind of listen and grab onto one thing that you can do to make generosity more and more of your lifestyle, then that's great. So here's a few different suggestions. The first one is to create margin. Create margin. You know what margins are, right? When you have a piece of paper and it's got the lines and stuff like that, or maybe when you're typing on the computer and there's the space around the outside where nothing goes. It's empty, right? It's the margin that you don't put anything on. In our life, we need margin. And what I mean by that is we need time in our life that's not constantly used up. We need resources and things in our life that aren't constantly being used. We need finances that are not constantly committed and being used. And the reason that's important to have margin in our life is so that when those times come that God is leading us to be generous, we're able to say yes. And again, it doesn't have to be huge ways. Maybe it is in that moment where you're at the gas pump and someone comes up and says, hey, listen, I really could use just a few gallons of gas. And you're able to put $20, $30 into their tank and bless them in that way. But whatever it might be, so that you have a little bit of that freedom, or maybe it's even your time, and someone says, hey, listen, I really could use some help moving this or doing that. Or even someone just says, hey, can we get together and just talk? I'd love to be able to talk through something with you. You have that space, you have that margin to be able to say yes. Another thing you can do to have a generous lifestyle is to plan it. Now, I know sometimes we think that generosity has to be spontaneous, that has to come out of the blue and, has to be one of those things that just sort of strikes you. But I really believe that God can use it when we plan to be generous, that we can look within our schedules and we can say, okay, this time every month or this time every week or whatever it might be, this time is going to be used and set aside that I'm going to just find a way to serve and to help people. Or maybe it's within our finances, that we look within the resources that we have. Our family, we give once a month. We have planned out, that's probably because I'm married to a bookkeeper and so she's got spreadsheets galore, but we have these things planned out, not because we want to take the heart out of our giving, but because we want to be as generous as we can. And so we take the time to look at our finances and we plan that out, and then we give once a month so that it fits in there and we know it's not going to be missed. And so maybe for you, finding a way for you to give, maybe if you don't give on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis, maybe giving's not a part of your lifestyle, maybe you can pause and look at your finances and say, okay, this coming new year, we're going to start to give. And you plan that out. Or maybe again, it's in your time. Or maybe it's even in other ways too. But the third way I want to encourage you to pursue a generous lifestyle is to practice generosity in a variety of ways. Because again, sometimes we kind of get in that rut. Sometimes we think that generosity can only be in my finances, or generosity can only be with my talents or my time. But maybe it's in other ways too. Maybe our generosity can be with our forgiveness. Maybe we can make it a goal that this holiday season or even this new year coming up that I'm going to be more generous with my forgiveness. I'm going to be more generous with the talents that I've never used before. Maybe there are things that you've been holding on to and kind of holding back from people saying, I don't really know if I can use this, but you're going to find ways to use those talents that you don't normally use. Don't feel like you have to be pigeonholed, friends, in the way that you are generous. Find a variety of ways. A fourth thing, celebrate the generosity of others to you. One of the ways that you can cultivate a generous lifestyle is for you to notice and to celebrate the generosity that people bring into your life. When we notice those things, when we notice what people are doing, it not only blesses them in the way that they have been generous to you and it shows your appreciation, but it kind of begins to kind of tune your mind and tune your heart in a different way. And you begin to look for those same ways. And you think, oh, so-and-so did this for me. Maybe I can do this for someone else as well. Another way that we can have a generous lifestyle is to be generous in the small things. To be generous in the small things. Maybe it's like today when you go out to lunch. Our family oftentimes on Sunday afternoons, we'll go out and grab some lunch somewhere. And if it's one of those restaurants where you're paying and you give a tip, maybe the old standard was like 15%. Standard today is a lot of times 18%. Maybe it's just adding a dollar more, or maybe it's adding up to 20%. I mean, the truth is you're going to tip, and so often it's already going to just be a couple dollars more, but imagine the blessing it might be for that individual, even in the small ways, to give a little bit bigger of a tip. Maybe it's also being generous in the small things of the words you share with people, whether it's your kids or your spouse or someone else in your family, of just simply mentioning, hey, you look great today, or don't you look nice today, or hey, that was a really great thing you did earlier this week or today. But to be generous even in the small ways. Another way to pursue a generous lifestyle is to do it even when it's not needed. To be generous, to be giving, even when it's not needed. Sometimes we come up here and we share a plea and we say, hey, listen, we need to be able to do this within our church family, or we have this need in the community, or whatever it might be. But what if you're just generous even when no one mentions it and no one knows about it? Another way to be generous in our generous lifestyle is to simply pray for someone. Maybe you could choose a person a week, and every day that week, I'm going to pray for so-and-so. And maybe they don't even know about it. Maybe they do. Maybe you shoot them a text or an email or a call and say, hey, I just want you to know I've been praying for you this week. Just want to encourage you in that way, but to pray for someone regularly. Another way is to send someone encouragement. Again, this could be a simple email, text message, phone call. It could be a card, but to regularly just send encouragement and kind words to someone. Another way is to volunteer for something. To find those things that maybe people need help with. Maybe it's to volunteer in the community, to volunteer at our schools, to volunteer here at the church. To find those ways that you can just put your hands to it and to help out, and it may not cost you a dime. And the last way to maybe work on a generous lifestyle, something that you could do, is to praise a business or a company or an individual on social media. So often it's easy to fire off that negativity on social media, to blast that restaurant or that local company that did you wrong. And I mean, what does that do in the end, really? Those people are probably never going to see that comment. And all you're doing is getting that name of being that person in the community. But what if you were the opposite? What if you were the one that was constantly putting generous words on Facebook or Instagram or so many other ways? You were the one that was known as the Barnabas, the encourager with your words. Friends, the point is, no matter what it might be, big, small, any other way, we are called to be a generous people because our Heavenly Father is generous to us. And it's time that we get rid of the bad name that sometimes society says that church is just a bunch of hypocritical, greedy people. Instead, we should be known as the people who are generous with what God has given us to make a difference in others' lives. So let's pray. Father, we truly do thank you for your generosity to us, your generosity that you have poured out into our lives, and you constantly, it's just like it never ends, God. In those moments when we go through hardships and you bring us through. In those moments, in those small ways that we don't even notice it until it's long over with. God, you are generous to us. But so often, Lord, we confess, we admit, and we repent of being stingy with those generous gifts to us. God, may we turn them around back out to others. May we give to others. May we find ways to be generous in a variety of ways. And Lord, I pray that if there are those this morning who maybe are struggling with that, maybe they could take some of these things we looked at this morning and we could just find one thing that can help us in our generosity. Lord, may we be known as a generous people for your glory. That when they hear the name Christian, not even Smithfield Christian Church, but when they hear the name Christian, that they perk up and they get excited.